Translation isn't always easy. Sometimes you're dealing with esoteric concepts or obscure references that only the creator truly understands. And it's not realistic to expect a translator to be deeply invested in every project they take on. A cursory glance at established lore is probably a good idea, especially if you're, let's say, translating the fourth entry in a running series. But the finer details are still likely to get lost, especially when translators keep changing. And sometimes they're just particularly bad at their jobs, and characters end up saying the exact opposite of what they were meant to. Other times it ends up being vastly different, or, as we'll soon find out, they didn't say anything at all and it still required a translation for some reason. It's not because localizers are stupid per se, they just have bad luck when they think sometimes. So for today, we're going to take a look at some instances where the characters really didn't say that. In the original Suikoden, there's a book in the library that explains how rune unites work and the lore behind them. However, it ends on a cryptic note saying that if 3 runes were to unite, it would unleash the ultimate magic, but try as you might, it can't be done. The thing is, the Japanese version doesn't mention 3 runes anywhere. It just says that when 2 casters unite, the ultimate magic is unleashed. Because of the limited space in the books, the localizer would have had some problems getting the text to fit, so rewrites were a necessity. But this change is either an intentional attempt to confuse the player or just a typo where they meant to write 2 but accidentally wrote 3. But why on earth would a localizer want to confuse the player? I don't know, but another book seems to show an emerging pattern. In the 5th old book, you can find some short clues to the whereabouts of several craftsmen in the game to help you recruit them. Except for Lester, where the book instead sends you to the completely wrong location, claiming he's working in Moravia Castle when he's actually in Kirov. Moravia is only accessible toward the endgame, while Kirov becomes available around the halfway point, so it's not like they're close to each other, so you could figure out he probably went from one to the other, or anything like that. In Japanese, it correctly places him in Kirov. Considering recruiting Lester is unintuitive as it is, why would the localizer make it even harder? Actually, why would you even think you could interact with the stews in Kirov of all places, or that it's needed to recruit someone? But at least the Japanese book informs you that there's a character you've missed there. The next example comes from the original localization of Suikoden 2, where a guy is perpetually standing outside Shu's house, asking you to please accept the job. This is something that confused many players back in the day, when it's actually nothing more than a polite request for you to go away. The most likely reason for this is that the localizer misunderstood Hikitori because it technically has 2 meanings, either to leave or to accept or collect something. But this interpretation is very strange and should have been dismissed at a glance, since the sentence doesn't contain an object to be accepted, and there's no context suggesting it should be. It's also a standard set phrase, so it's particularly strange to grab the word job from thin air to fit your faulty translation. When Hugo attempts to trick the Harmonians into thinking he's the Flame Champion, Sasarai makes a fairly odd comment by saying that at least he looks over 30 and throws in a quip about the Flame Champion. The problem with this is, 1. He does not look over 30 by any stretch of the imagination, and 2. In Japanese, he said pretty much the opposite, and that, despite the way I look, I'm actually over 30. This is just one of the examples where the localizer clearly didn't understand the lore, or even what they're looking at, as Sasarai looks younger than he is because he bears the True Earth rune. Unfortunately, this is a problem that keeps occurring in Suikoden 3 because the localizer was too busy trying to be funny rather than make sense. Sasarai in particular is a very different character in English from the original. In English, he's a sarcastic twerp who keeps making quips to everyone, making him fairly unlikable, while in Japanese he is polite and matter-of-fact. As you play through the game, particularly Hugo's chapters, you might notice that the Koreans are very quick to blame everything that happens on spirits, to the point that it's idiomatic to them, and they even use it as an expression of surprise. Unfortunately, this is not the case in Japanese. While they do mention that they have a belief in spirits, they do not ascribe everything to them. In fact, in a lot of cases, they don't say anything at all in Japanese. In general, they don't speak any differently from other people in the game. You might think someone would have pointed out that it's a bit problematic to turn the only people in the game with slightly darker skin into stereotypical superstitious natives, but apparently no one thought that could be an issue. But don't worry, it's not like they injected any other casual racism into the game, like making one of the few black characters speak in broken English or any... Oh, yeah, they did that too. Like I mentioned in the previous section, the localized Suikoden 3 sometimes translates silence. In fact, it has a surprising amount of silence somehow being translated into actual words, or really short statements becoming long monologues, or just nothing like the original at all. These examples show that either literally nothing is said or very little is in the original. At this point, you can't really claim to be translating anymore, you're just making things up. There are also instances where the original script makes references to the previous games that the localization just ignores. Like this scene where Reed warns Lily that her escapades will get her in trouble with Tinto authorities, but in Japanese, he specifically names Marlowe from Suikoden 2. If you pick Geto as the Flame Champion, when he wakes up in the Chisha village in Chapter 4, Queen will say that the true fire rune is what killed her beloved Sanady. What she actually says is that a true rune is the cause of whatever happened to Sanady. She's not specifically calling out the true fire rune, nor is Sanady a person, nor did she call it her beloved. All those things were just assumed in translation. Sanady was the country Queen is from, but it was invaded by Harmonia because a true rune appeared there. Sanady was subsequently annexed by Harmonia, and its people made into third-class citizens, essentially slaves. There are no official records of what true rune was involved or what happened to it. To be fair, I wouldn't blame the localizer for not knowing the lore there, but that's also a pretty good argument for not straying too far from the original text. And to close us out, we have a bit of a short one. When playing through Luke's point of view in the Trinity site, once he gets to the Flame Champion's hideaway, the title card mysteriously calls it Serenia instead. What Serenia is anyone's guess. Only the localizer could answer that because it's entirely made up. In Japanese, the title card says, Flame Champion's Resting Place,